Hey players, how you doing? Welcome back to Players Guide. This episode of Players Guide, I'm going to be taking a look at my predictions for 2021 video game collecting and what actually happened this past year. Thank you so much for subscribing to Players Guide, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider tapping that subscribe button. You know I'll be tapping it all night long, and give that notification bell a big old ding dong so that you can stay up to date with the latest videos from Players Guide. You can find Players Guide on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You could join our community in the Discord, linked below, as well as find nearly daily retro gaming content from some of the highest quality streamers you have ever seen in your entire life, live on Twitch, like I said, nearly every day. But let's get right into it. We're going to head over and take a look at what I said would happen in 2021 back in 2022, and how closely I predicted that. Now, next week's video will be retro video game and video game collecting for 2022. So we're going to ring in the new year with that. I'm sure a lot of you guys will enjoy that video. So please consider coming back next week and checking that out. Again, you give that bell a big old ding dong and you'll know when that video drops. So the overall consensus, I believe, that was for last year in general for video game collecting was that games were going to continue to go up in price. And for the most part, that did happen. Let's take a look at what I said about the NES, my favorite console to collect for.
Happening. The CIB stuff is still quite popular. The sealed stuff is super hot right now. Loose cart. You might even see some of the more common stuff go down and cool off a little bit more in value. The popular games, they're going to hold their value for the next year. The rare or harder to find games, or the underrated uncommons, which I did a video on that too. I'll put a link for you. If you don't know about these games, you're going to want to know about them, because they are likely to go up over the next few years in value. That's what we're looking at.
I said that the cheap games would get cheaper, possibly. I think that's what I was thinking. That didn't really happen. They still kind of just stayed where they are. Not a lot happened for NES Collecting. I will say that I was right there in terms of the more expensive and rare games holding their value for the most part. Generally speaking, they also did go up. The more rare and desirable that game was, the more it was inflated in terms of market value over this past year. But nothing huge, like no really huge spikes. Where we did see a few spikes was just certain kind of second or third tier underrated gems, so to speak. So I think Kiwi Craze saw a bit of a jump at one point this past year, and just some other games like that along those lines. I'm not going to get into all those details. You could tune in to the episode I recently did on the state of NES collecting, and that'll give you all the details of what collecting for the Nintendo Entertainment System looks like right now, the current landscape of that market. So yeah, not a lot happened there for the NES, but I don't think I really got anything wrong there, other than I do think I was thinking it would have a little bit more momentum than it did. Not that it didn't have momentum in 2021, but not quite as hot as I thought.
It's not going to be too many changes for the NES unless we're looking at the sealed, graded, and just the CIB stuff. That will go up. But that could be...
So I do want to mention here about before we get into the Super Nintendo, which I was about to get to, but I saw this part of the video. I want to say that we saw some stuff happen with sealed collecting and the CIB graded games. I think that stuff will in the long term hold value and go up. Right now, there's a lot of skepticism towards how things are being auctioned off and graded and handled. And, with that market being a little bit murky right now, it's not a bad idea to, not go all in. But there will be, I think, out of that a good time. And if you could spot the good times to invest in those games, because those games are more of an investment. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because as digital becomes more predominant and collecting basically is going to be just collecting something physical, and the better condition and better quality and better protected those items are, the longer they will last. And also, to that point, if the cartridges can no longer play anymore, my loose cart collection is definitely going to take a hit in value when those games can't be played. Whereas the sealed games that have been graded and slabbed, I think that they will hold their value, probably appreciate in value over time too, because that's all they are, is a collectible. Super Nintendo.
Said for a lot of other consoles, like the Super Nintendo as well. Super Nintendo also going to cool off a little bit. Finally, I think we're going to see the Super Nintendo market just kind of cool down a bit. The underrated and uncommon games will continue to go up, and they're not going to go. It's not going to be as sharp as it was of an increase in value as we've seen over the past few years, but they will continue to go up. The rares, they're going to hold their value. They're not dropping. They'll slowly go up too.
So all that absolutely happened this past year. Again, in my mind, I think at this time, I thought some of those rares might have gone up more in value, but the games that actually went up most in value that I found a bit surprising were the sought-after uncommon games. Stuff like Chrono Trigger. A lot of RPGs saw a pretty big boost, and a lot of the flagship titles, like your Donkey Kong, Mario games, the first-party stuff, got a pretty good boost this past year in terms of value. Now, the actual rare games that are sort of under the radar or undervalued are still very undervalued. So, Super Nintendo right now, I wouldn't really say that it has cooled off, but if you're a completionist or a hardcore Super Nintendo collector looking for the rare and expensive titles, they're not as unattainable as some of these. Well, I should say that they're still expensive, but they didn't get inflated as much as many of the other consoles out there to collect for right now. The other thing too is the rare and undervalued games. I mean, there's still some that are very cheap. I did a video on this too that you could check out on the undervalued and underrated Super Nintendo games. I'll link that below for you. It talks about like games like Fun and Games. I think that might have been number one. Street Racer is another one. These games are very cheap compared to how rare they actually are. And if you look at some of the more valuable games on the Super Nintendo, people are looking for, like I said, stuff like the Final Fantasy games or Chrono Trigger, a lot of RPGs, and the flagship titles for that console have definitely seen a boost. So that says to me a lot of new collectors coming into the Super Nintendo, and a lot of people just looking for some nostalgic games still. That's keeping the market hot for Super Nintendo. But there's not a lot of people going for the complete Super Nintendo collection. There's a lot more going for the NES or N64. And that's just the way it is for Super Nintendo right now. So not a bad console to be collecting at this time.
Another one that's going to cool off. It already has started to cool off in 2020. Wasn't sure if we were going to see that before. 2021, not going to be too different. The rares, though, like if you're looking for Sculptor's Cut, I would pick something like that up now because it will go up in 2021. A lot of people are out there looking for complete N64 collections because it's quick and it's pretty easy.
So all that is true. I will say that it really didn't cool off. I thought that it might have come down a bit because The nostalgia factor for the N64 and the quality, honestly, for some of the games. The quality's not so great on all of them. Collection's easy to complete. But yeah, the nostalgia factor I thought will be wearing off, especially since it's an easier collection to complete. That doesn't seem to be the case yet. Maybe next year we'll see that happen. I would think it would happen soon, especially with where Gamecube is at.
Gamecube in 2021 is going to be hot. It was hot last year and the year before, and it's going to be hot again this year. Now, it might start to cool off in 2022. We could even see a little bit of that towards the end of 2021.
So no, we definitely didn't see that. We saw that it was hot, cooling off. That did not happen for GameCube. GameCube has been hot all year. What we are seeing now is some of the lesser known or underrated rares are going up in value. Flagship titles prices are through the roof. You know, a lot of those are between $80 and $100 right now, some of them. And the rare games, they're up there in price.
Because this time next year, you're going to be paying a lot more. Wii is going to start to go up a bit. So we've seen, because of COVID, some of the games like Wii Sports Resort, stuff like that went up. Some of the more popular Mario titles have gone up. I don't think they're going to really shoot up too much, those ones. They might start to go up a bit.
Okay, so for the Wii, I didn't get that one right. I was thinking last year that the nostalgia factor was going to kick in, and it didn't. And I was also thinking that, you know, seeing as how those games were still pretty cheap, maybe more people would be collecting for them. That might be the case, but this library of Wii games is so vast, and there's so many games that just aren't worth owning if you're planning on playing any of them. You're collecting a lot of garbage and shovelware that I don't think that there is a ton of people collecting for this console. It's not one that I'm very interested in collecting for, except for some interesting games, and I'm not alone on that. What we did see was not so much the flagship titles. They climbed up a little bit, but in 2020 they saw their biggest increase. And some of the rares on the Wii have actually gone down in value. Some of the rarest games, because they're not great games. The games that are going up in value for the Wii are exclusives, really good games, the underrated games, the popular uncommons, the hidden gems, all of that stuff. And we saw some price increases that people are speculative about, such as the stuff released by limited run games like Axiom Verge, and then that Shakedown Hawaii game. I know that wasn't limited run, that was another limited print company. But those ones, they're kind of are almost artificially inflated because it's a lot of more resellers trying to get more for those games, and they have those games, then there really is a demand for those games. But collectors are going to have to pay for those games if they don't already have them. The rare stuff like Hello Kitty Cruisers, Mario and Sonic, Rio Olympic Games hasn't really, they've kind of gone down. And Turbo's one that I think is still holding up there pretty well. You know, it's still early on in collecting for this console, so we're going to see what really happens here. I don't think that the current market is an accurate reflection of what the future market will be at all for the Wii U. Now is a good time to start collecting. One thing I've noticed, though, for myself, I thought I'd get more aggressive with WiiU Collecting in 2021. I really didn't. One of the problems with that is it's getting harder for me to find games that I don't have. And there doesn't seem to be a ton of Wii U out there. Now, what does that mean in the forecast of what the market is going to look like? Again, tune in next week and you'll find out. Here's me talking about sealed games. Let's just touch upon it because I want to see what I said.
Collecting. Sealed stuff is not going to slow down in 2021. There will be a slowdown coming in terms of the demand for this stuff, but it really has made its way to the forefront of video game communities and video game collecting, that it's not just considered like a retro thing anymore. People know about it.
So all of that is true to some extent. I think the slowdown we might be seeing now for that, because prices got inflated so high with some auctions, like the Super Mario 64 auction that was like $1.5 million. Everybody heard about that, couldn't believe it, and then realized, why is there this exception here with these WATA-graded games being sold at heritage auctions, going for so much more than what they're really worth. And, obviously Mario 64, you're not always going to find a sealed copy, but that game in general is not a rare game. There are sealed copies out there. So now, because of that, what happened with that auction and a few others that some YouTubers had pointed out doing some investigative journalism, is that companies and resellers out there that may not be forming some shill bidding and different sketchy things going on in that community right now. So you got to be very careful with what you are purchasing if you're going to get into the sealed and graded game collecting. Make sure it's coming from a reliable source, as well as just be careful with what you're paying for something, because it does look like that people, like there's people out there being taken advantage of. That's for sure. And I think we can all see that. That's sort of the dark underbelly of collecting right now. And it's going to take a little bit of time for that to build up the momentum it had. I think some people who were taking advantage of that got a little bit too carried away too quickly. But over time, things will clear up. Some of that stuff will blow over, and we'll see where it goes. But I did mention earlier in this video that there is a future for sealed and graded games, and it's probably going to be a very expensive one, but a long-term investment for sure.
Sega. I think the Master System, I said last year it was really underrated and undervalued. I still think that. But I think this year, it's going to be one that you're going to want to buy, because I think it's going to start going up. And the reason for that is because it's been undervalued and underappreciated for so long. And if you're looking at getting into some of this other stuff, let's face it, and that generation, the libraries for those games are massive. Massive. Most people.
So I don't know why I started comparing the Master System to the Wii. That library is massive compared to the Master System's library. I do still think it's a great time to collect for the Master System. Its day has not come, and I'm beginning to think it may never come. There are the, top 5 or 10 tier rare titles that will continue to go up over time. But in general, if you're going to collect for a library so small that then, it's even if stuff does go up a bit, it's not going to cost you that much to get a complete set. And I'm also speaking from a completionist perspective. If you're just looking for some flagship titles, popular titles, those have seen a bit of an increase, but this system is still very underrated, has not seen the increase like other consoles have, and is one of the best consoles to collect for right now if you're into 8-bit era gaming. And that I was wrong to think that it was going to have a sudden increase because it was due. That may never happen. It's been due for a very long time, and it hasn't got that increase.
Like the Master System is a lot more affordable right now, a lot easier to attain because it's a much smaller library. I mean, they come in the nice cases. There's some really good games. Worthwhile to invest in the Master System in 2021, because I don't think it's going to, prices are going to skyrocket or jump, because that would have already happened with the nostalgia factor a couple years ago. But it will go up. Genesis will also go up a little bit for some of the stuff, like the shoot 'em ups, and some of the really popular games and rare games. But that's in the same boat as what I was talking about with the NES and the SNES. A lot of the lesser...
So Genesis, yes, many of those popular games and shoot 'em up specifically, some shoot 'em ups have seen a pretty significant increase over the past year or two. The general collection, the library, has gone up a bit, but nothing, too extreme. But those games that I thought would have a little increase or might go up slightly, I think that's what I said there, have definitely seen a little bit more than a little increase for many of them.
I don't think it'll go up huge. What I do think is going to jump in price quite a bit in 2021 is the Dreamcast. I think that stuff has been just creeping up there in price for a while, and I hear a lot of people online talking about how great the Dreamcast was.
So speaking to the Sega Saturn and Dreamcast, they did go up a lot. The Sega Saturn saw a pretty good price boost right across the board for a lot of games. The rare and sought after stuff and the popular titles saw significant price increases, but I'm going to talk about more about these two consoles in an upcoming video. Same with Xbox. I haven't touched on that, and the Genesis. I know Xbox isn't Sega, but I'm just saying I haven't touched on that. I did a bunch of state of collecting videos where we looked at some rare, uncommon, popular games, undervalued games, right across the board for several different consoles. There's a dedicated episode for each of them. I am going to do that for these consoles, so please stay tuned. Ding dong that notification bell and tap that subscribe button, because you will be getting those videos. I got a bunch of other stuff planned, so I can't give you a date yet, but it is in the pipeline. Also, to try to keep this video somewhat relatively short in length and watchable, I want to touch upon everything and just give you a general overview of what's happened, and I got to try to keep it quick here for certain consoles, especially some that are not necessarily as popular to collect for as others, like the PS1, the NES, and boy, the PS2. I'm going to get to that one in just a second.
Wow, I did not think PlayStation stuff was going to go up in value as much as it did last year in 2021, which I guess it still is 2021, but it's the very end of it. It's past us. It's still going to go up. It's still going to go up in 2021. But I can't see it jumping like it did last year. Especially some of the games like the fighting games, the horror survival games. Keep an eye out for these games. If you can find them cheap, pick them up, because a lot of those...
So when I said at the beginning there 2021, I meant to say 2020. But that was, for the most part, bang on, except for a few things. You're not going to be able to find those games cheap unless you get lucky at a yard sale or flea market or thrift shop or something along those lines. You are probably not going to find those games cheap. They've all gone up. And when I said I didn't think it would continue with the momentum it had 2 years ago as it did this past year, it certainly did. All right, let's take a look at the PS2. This is a console that has seen significant gains in a lot of the prices for many of the rares, many of the RPGs, any sort of popular platformer, anything like right across the board. That console is up. It is hot. It has been hit with the nostalgia factor, and I am shocked at the prices for some of these games. I would say that the PS2 has gone up the most on average, more than any other console this past year. It kind of shocked me at how expensive some of the rare games are. They're up there with some of the rare games on N64, NES, SNES, and PS1, and they don't show signs of slowing down yet as of you watching this video. There might be a couple dips for some games, but it is still the hottest console to collect for at the end of 2021, start of 2020. We'll see what happens next year.
They're on PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 2 is the one I think.
That's right. There's a lot of horror games on PS2 that have gone up.
Just
Silent Hill.
PlayStation 2 might see its biggest increase in value for its games out of all the consoles next year. I'm going to call it. I know it's a bold statement, but that's what I think is going to happen. The console's over 20 years old now. A lot of people...
Whoa. I don't remember saying that, but man, sometimes I even impress myself. That was a bold prediction, but man, it was bang on. I got to give myself a pat on the back there. I don't remember saying that. Let's find out why I thought that, because I honestly don't remember why, but that's a very accurate prediction. And man, I should have been hoarding PS2 games so that I could be selling them for double what they're worth at the end of this year versus at that time. Even though they were on a bit of an incline then too, they were going up in price.
Talking about hidden gems, a lot of people talk about underrated games on those consoles. If you look around online, you're going to see those discussions happening. Nostalgia factor is going to kick in. And PS2, I would say for me personally, was my favorite console of that time. Even though I didn't have one, I was playing the Nintendo Entertainment System, which is why I'm a retro gamer.
Okay, so there you go. Was a pretty accurate analysis of the forecast for PS2 and the reason why. So again, next week, tune in. I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen in 2022 for all of these consoles, maybe even a few others.
The PS3, well, the PS3 is similar to the Xbox 360 to some degree. There is a certain amount of common games that are not going to have much value, but Sony's going to do better than Xbox here for collectability. The PS3
way
stuff,
better.
I mean, even just looking at the case and everything, I think looks nicer than when you look at the 360 and the Wii stuff on a shelf. It seems like the best quality for that time of product in terms of collectability. And PS3 had a lot of major franchises established on that console that we are going to see next year on the PS5 they're going to continue on with those franchises. So PS3 is going to be really cheap to collect for in 2021, but just be prepared to see some of those games starting to go up. Like, don't be caught off guard if one day you walk to a game store and there's a game that was maybe $20 or $25 before and you see it for $40 or $35. Not a huge jump, but some of the...
So I'd say overall, that analysis of the PS3 market was pretty accurate, except there were a few games that saw pretty significant jumps. They really got boosted up there in terms of value. But if you're collecting for PS3, all hope is not lost. No, I don't think anything's like way out there and completely unattainable, with the exception of NBA Elite 11.
And didn't talk about this one, but now it's a last gen console. I guess I should talk about the Xbox One too. So I don't think we're going to see too much happen here until the end of the year, until maybe October. Then we're going to see some of the stuff starting to really drop in value, the more common games, the lesser known games. That might be a good time to collect some of that stuff, because sometimes the lesser known stuff is valuable, whether it's good or not, or popular.
So the PS4 has gone down overall, new games, used games, but not significantly. I think what I'm talking about, this day is still to come, but didn't happen in 2021. It's just kind of stayed steady, but on a slight decline in terms of the overall market value of a lot of PS4 games. Now, there are a few harder to find limited print games, you know, Japanese type games and that have held a little bit more value. But I think we'll see those games in the future start to go up more than the, you know, typical North American library.
Which would bring us right to the Xbox. Xbox, those games are going up. They've been underrated, and there's so many hidden gems on it. They're going to be brought to the forefront by different communities online and you know, content creators.
So that is happening.
You're going to see
still
what games are really good, what the hidden gems are, what games are undervalued, and people are going to start buying them. We already know what most of the rares are. Just like all of these consoles I'm talking about, you can probably find a video here on Player's Guide. I'm almost certain I've made one for all of these now.
You can.
Talking about what games are rare and what to look for when collecting. So
overall, Xbox games did go up a little bit. It's still a great time to collect for the Xbox because it doesn't have the hype that GameCube has and PS2 has right now. So for that generation, it is definitely the cheaper option to pick up some of the games that were released across multiple platforms. And then there's lots of different hidden gems on the Xbox that are still very affordable. They may have seen a price increase, but like I said, they're not unattainable, not yet. I don't know if we're going to see like a Sega Master System effect here happen, because I did expect there to be more hype in the Xbox, the OG Xbox market. And there wasn't as much as I thought. So things went up a bit, but not to the extent that I thought it was going to see. I thought it was going to follow suit with the GameCube and PS2, and be behind them, but not too far behind. And it did sort of follow suit, but it didn't see like the ripple up that we saw with those other consoles where it was so significant.
Xbox 360, on the other hand, that is what's going to be in the value bins. It's going to be in more and more of the mom and pop stores. You know, the privately owned game stores is where you're going to see a lot of that now that stores like EB Games and GameStop are not carrying them.
So I'm not seeing as much of that as I did at the beginning of 2021 as I am at the end. Now, I still am seeing, you know, if I go to a thrift store, it's mostly 360. Still some PS2 stuff in there, but mostly 360 and Wii is what I'm seeing a lot of now. 360 is definitely cheap to collect for. The rare titles and some of those sort of titles that appeal more to like anime and Japanese gaming fans, those are the ones that have seen the big increases over the past year. The other stuff really hasn't too much. So yeah, still a pretty good time to collect for the 360. Snag those rares while you still can, and they aren't too expensive. Now, in that video I was watching, I'm going to link that at the end of this one and in the comments below so that you guys can watch the full episode, because I have clipped it here so that, you know, I can make this whole video watchable and it's not just me watching another video. I put a decent commentary along with it. I did touch upon things like different peripherals and paraphernalia and different odds and ends that you could collect for various consoles, standees, stuff like that. That stuff has all gone up in 2021, which I said it would. I think that stuff now is just going to continue to increase because so many people have put time and effort into their game rooms, and the game room, especially as things become digital and more collectible, those are real collectors' items that are vintage, and people want to have them. Before it was kind of a niche market, and now it's at the forefront of video game collecting and retro game collecting. That stuff's not going to slow down. You might be able to snag a good deal even on eBay because of the listings. They're kind of awkward listings sometimes unless it's coming from a collector that really knows what they have. And then even then, people might be referring to something under a different name that it's commonly referred to as than what it's actually called. There's just so much weird stuff to touch upon there. Now, I did also in that video talk a little bit about some of the things like 1-Up arcades and some of the Game & Watches and the mini consoles. I feel like now that craze has kind of died down. Like I saw the Zelda Game & Watch is nothing hard to come by like the Mario Game & Watch was. Those 1-Up arcades are everywhere. They're in like all the major retailers now. I think that is still a popular thing, but it's starting to look more like a fad now, and that it's starting to kind of die off and slow down a little bit. I don't want to talk too much about future trends because I really want you guys to tune next week for that episode about what the forecast is going to look like for video game collecting and retro gaming in 2022. So please tune in for that, and don't forget to check out all the links below. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Player's Guide, and I'll catch you on the flip side.